Native modules are so much easier to use than the module pattern, but that is not where their benefits end. Bundling applications recognize the keywords we use for native modules and can use those keywords to package all of your JavaScript files into a single file. That means that instead of having multiple script tags in your HTML file, you can get away with one. And that one script tag doesn't need to be labeled as type module. Really, this is how native modules are used in most situations. Very few projects use the type module in the script tag for JS modules because they use a bundling tool to combine all the JavaScript files into a single file and then load that file. So there's nothing wrong with loading modules using type module in the script tag, but think of the benefits of loading a single file. Much faster, and we want to take advantage of that. So we're going to look at bundling the modules we just set up using Webpack. Now, this is not a tutorial on Webpack. We will just be covering bundling. There is a lot that Webpack can do, and we could get lost learning Webpack and forget we are learning the critical parts of JavaScript. So I'm going to focus on what we need to do to bundle these files, and that's all. Now remember that you could use a different bundler like Browse Serifier, Rollup, or others, but for this topic we're going to be using Webpack. So let's get started. Now as you can see, we have here all the files as we last left them in the last topic. All of our JavaScript files. We also have everything else we need to make this work and run. But we want to, prior to deploying, bundle all of these JavaScript files into a single file. Now, while we're doing development, we would keep it this way. That's the advantage of using these modules, is it makes development much easier. But when we're ready to deploy, then we would bundle them up. So let's talk about how we would do that. Now, first and foremost, you need to set up a package.json file. This just makes it easier to work with bundling. And for many projects, you will set up a package.json file to begin with. And it will control through the scripts area a lot of the things you're doing in that project. One of the things we will put in that scripts area is how to do a build, how to bundle these files up. So we're going to be doing a lot of this work from the terminal, or in Windows, the terminal or command prompt, because we'll be using Node and NPM. Now I'm going to go ahead and use a separate window because of the amount of work we'll be doing in that. I won't be doing it inside of Visual Studio Code. But I do want to use Visual Studio Code terminal really quick to make something easier for me. So I'm going to open it up either from the menu, or you can use the key shortcut. And all I'm going to do is enter print working directory. I just want to see where I'm at. And the reason I'm doing this is going to make it easier for me when I open the terminal window to get to where I need to be, to get to this folder that contains all of these files. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to open my terminal, and I'll just put CD. And then I'm going to put quotes around this path because I'm sure as a part of my path I've used spaces or something. And so I want to make sure that the change directory command works. So I press return, and here I am in my current directory. So to set up a package.json file using npm, all we have to do is type npm init. And it's going to prompt us with some questions. First off, it's asking for the package name, and it gives us a default, which is basically the folder name. Instead, I'm going to type in random video. That's what I want the package name to be. Version, I'll just accept the default by pressing return. A description, plays random videos from a JSON file. Entry point. Now, the default is index.js, but really our entry point is main.js, so I'm going to change that. Test command, if we were doing unit testing, The test command is where we would enter the command that would conduct that unit testing. Just press return, get repository. We can enter a get repository where we want to store this, which is something you want to do when you're working on a project, obviously. But for our purposes, we're just bundling, so I'm going to press return and accept it. No keywords. And author, I'll just put my name. And finally, accept the license. And there it writes out the package.json folder and says, is this okay? Is this what you want? I'll just press return to accept the default of yes, and it will go ahead and write that. If I come back here to Visual Studio Code, we can see that we have a package.json file now. We can see everything that was entered in as a part of the responses that we made. Now, inside of this scripts area is where we will set up a command that will run the build. It will run Webpack and do a build for us. So we'll be using npm to start that Webpack build, but in order to do that, we'll need to put something inside the scripts tag. But before we do that, we need to set up Webpack. We need to have Webpack installed for our project here so that we can use it. And so once again, I'm going to use the terminal. Let me go ahead and clear what we have here. And then to install Webpack, I simply enter npm I, and then this option indicates that in the package.json file, I want to indicate that the things I'm installing are required for development. So it'll make an entry into package.json. And here's what I want to install. Webpack and Webpack CLI. Once I have that entered, I press return. The installation process will happen, as we can see it's going on here. And this is just being installed in that folder, that project folder that we're working on, so that we can use it. And here we have everything installed. Notice I got a warning, no repository field. I didn't enter that, and it's just telling me about that. But other than that, everything looks good. Now, it's possible you could get some errors when you try to install Webpack. If that happens, copy the error and then Google it. A lot of times you'll find solutions to those errors. Many times what the error is there's something needs to be updated on your machine. But once we get that installed, we are good to go. Okay, back here in the package.json file, we can see that it included those dev dependencies. Dependencies for development, Webpack and Webpack CLI. We can see that there. Also notice that we now have a new folder, node modules. So any modules that are needed by Webpack to do what it needs to do were installed and placed in node modules. Obviously, if your project was using any third-party modules, they would be inside that folder as well. Now, in order to tell Webpack what to do, or tell it how it should bundle our files, we need to set up a Webpack config file. So that's what we're going to do next. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it webpack.config.js. So it's a JavaScript file. And we just need to enter a few things in here. Now, we're only defining basically what's going to happen with the bundling. Obviously, this file could contain a lot of things for how Webpack works in your project. And if you want to learn more about the Webpack config file, you can go to this URL and learn a lot more about it. But let's go ahead and set up our Webpack config file so we can do the bundling that we're trying to do. So we need to define what it's going to do inside of module.exports. And this is an object, so we need to set it equal to an object, and then we have the curly braces there. And inside of this is where we define how things are put together, how the bundling happens. So the first thing we want to put is entry. This identifies our starting point, where we want to start the bundling. And the property of this is a string. We basically enter the path to our JavaScript files, and I'm going to choose main.js as the starting file for that. Then we need to put a comma at the end of that. Remember, we're creating an object here, a JavaScript object, so we need to make sure that we have that comma before the next item that we include. And the next item is the output. We need to define where it's starting at, but also where it's going to put the bundle.js file. Where should that output be? Now, output is an object, and so we'll put curly braces there. And there's two things we want to define inside of this. One is path, the path where it will be stored, and the other is file name, where we want to put what we want the name of the file to be. Now, path needs to be an absolute path. And with the different environments that Webpack runs on, there can be issues with path. And so to make sure that the path is written correctly, we use a module that Webpack has put together. And the name of that module is path. So basically what we're going to do is define a module we want to use here. Now, since this is going to be run inside of Node, we're going to use the common JS method of defining that module. So we're setting path equal to require, and then inside of require, the name of the module, which is path. Now, we can use this variable to define our path. And we do that using a method that is on that module called resolve. Like that. And then we pass in two parameters. One is __dir name, and then we indicate the directory where we want that placed. And then we need to put a comma at the end of all of this. So that's going to give us the folder where the file will be placed. And that folder is going to be inside of here, so it's going to create a public folder inside of here. And then the file name that it will place, we will put bundle.js, like that. So really our config file there is done. I do want to put one more thing with our config file. I want to designate the mode. By default, Webpack is going to run in production. But I want to put here development for now, because I want to be able to look at the file once it's bundled together. In production, it would minify it, remove all the spaces, all the comments, basically put it on a single line. So I want to avoid that for now. All right, so we have our Webpack config file. So that will tell Webpack how we want it to bundle our files. So we can go ahead and save that. Now, as I said, we need to put a script command in our package.json so that we can run Webpack and do the build. So inside of here, inside of scripts, we're going to go ahead and do that. Now all we're going to do here is put a command for build that should be run anytime we want to build this project. So basically we'll use npm and we'll indicate that we want to run build, and it will come to the package.json file. It will look up build, it will find the command we've entered here and run that. And that command is going to indicate that Webpack should run and use this config file. So since this is a JSON file, we need to enter this in double quotes, then a colon, and now inside of double quotes, we'll enter the command that we want to run. And that is Webpack. That will run Webpack. Then we want to specify the config file. So we go ahead and put that in as well. And then a comma before the test entry so that we have a valid JSON file. So that's the command. We'll save that and everything is set up. Now basically whenever we want to build this, we simply go to the terminal or command prompt and we enter npm run build. So we can continue to do development, and then when we're ready to build, we enter that command. So let's go ahead and do that and see what we get. Clear this out, and then npm run build. Notice the command that is used right there. That's exactly what we enter in package.json. And here's the results we get. Tells us the amount of time, tell us what it did. We have bundle.js. As a result, here is all the JavaScript files that it went through in order to create that. So it tells us what it accomplished. Let's go back here now and take a look at that. We now have a public folder right here. If we open that up, we can see bundle.js. You can see that Webpack has done with that. Not only did it combine all the files, but it also did some obfuscation with the JavaScript as well. So that causes our JavaScript code to be hidden, more difficult to read. But the end result is we have a single file that we can now use. Let's go ahead and take a look and see how that would work. So I'm going to simply comment out these 4 script tags. And I'll just add a new script tag that will just be bundle.js. That's in the public, let's see, that's in public / bundle.js. And we'll go ahead and save that. So there we have a single JavaScript file because we bundled them together. Now let's just click go live, create our live server, and we'll just take a look at that. Make sure it's still working.
ES6.
Randomize button
We
works.
have had...
Stop button works. Play button works. So everything is still working. The advantage is we now have everything bundled into a single JavaScript file. All right, let's move on to the next topic.